starting?
The plan is, yes, we're starting Siman Pevav, Mitzvah Hashem. Not a very long Siman. And Siman Pevav, I'm going to put a lot of words on the screen. You shouldn't read them. You can read them if you're really bored. The first two halachos talk about how to know if you have an egg in front of you, like in the pictures in the corner there. If you have an egg in front of you, how do you know if that egg is kosher or not? Okay, you have no idea what bird it came from, but you want to know how you know it's kosher. So that it has all kinds of things about that, and I'll tell you about that at a different time. That maybe 2 times from now. How you would know if you look at the egg whether it's kosher. But that's because you're in an unusual situation where you're walking in the forest and you pick up an egg and you don't know what it is. Is it kosher or is it treif? So you're trying to figure out whether it's kosher or treif. But the more typical situation is that a person doesn't just have an egg, they have a bird also. And the bird laid the egg. So they're going to decide whether the egg is kosher depending on which bird it came from. And they have the bird in front of them. Okay, so that's in Siman Pei Beis to decide how you know if the bird is kosher. Okay, Siman Pei Vav is how to know if it, all kinds of halachos about eggs being kosher. But it starts from Pei Beis of knowing whether the bird itself is kosher. So if I'm going to do 2 times, this time and next time, Mitzvah Hashem, about just understanding whether the birds are kosher, which of course plays into whether the egg is kosher. And then we'll get actually into Siman Pei Vav itself. Yeah, I'm going to tell you about that. Okay, so it's going to be 2. It's going to be twice. Okay, so what is like this? The Torah lists twice, but the Torah lists 24 birds that you're not allowed to eat. Okay, the Torah doesn't tell you which birds you are allowed to eat, or simanim to know whether the birds are kosher or not kosher, but rather the Torah lists you off 24 birds that you're not allowed to eat. Now, the truth is, there are really only 20 birds listed in Torah. Okay, there are really only 20 birds that are listed in Torah, but the Gemara says that for 4 of those birds, it says this bird and its min also, like as ha'aya lemina, as ayriv leminoi. It says for 4 of them, it says that there's a min to that bird also, and that's to be marba another 4 birds that are also aser. Okay, so there's 20 birds that are actually listed, and then there's 4 birds that are understood. So there's a bird, the bird called nates, and that bird is aser, and then there's a bird that's close enough to the nates that it's called liminehu, but it's not a nate. It's not really a nate. So it's an extra bird. Okay, it's like in it. One type. Now I'm going to tell you in a second. Each bird doesn't mean only one bird. The word paras means more than one bird, but one type of bird. But so nates, leminehu means nates is one type of bird, and leminehu means a little bit separate from that. It wouldn't exactly be a nates, but it wouldn't be something totally different. It wouldn't be a duck. It's something in between. It's close enough to a nates as a nates leminehu. Okay, so now these.
You don't know what's close enough to what to know what's what.
I'm going to tell you that in a second. That's correct. You're 100%. But the Torah is telling us that that's what's going on. Okay, so now these birds, the Gemara gives translations, I'm guessing it's Aramaic, of a bunch of them, tells like what they are in practice. Okay, what the Gemara gives translations for a bunch of them. It tells you that bird means this thing. This thing means it. Like gives you like a translation into. And the Gemara tells you what 2 of the leminois are, okay? But it doesn't tell you what the other 2 are, okay? So I'm not really sure how a person is supposed to know 24 birds, because there's such a thing as a person who knows all 24 birds. The Gemara doesn't even tell you what the other 2 leminois are, okay? It tells you the leminoi for the oiriv and the nates, but not for the ayah and the anafa. So I don't know how you're supposed to even know what they are, because the Gemara tells you, again, some of the regular birds it translates, and 2 of the leminois, the Gemara talks about what they mean, but the other 2 leminois doesn't say. The Ram says, okay, this is all 24 birds, and for 2 of them he says, and the min of this one, which is what the Gemara says, and for the other 2 he just says, and another one, that's the min of that thing. He doesn't tell you what it is. You're sort of like clueless what they're supposed to be. Okay, but and
Ram says, we don't know.
Then he just says the min of that thing. Another one that's a min of this thing. For some of them, for the oiriv and the nates, he says this thing which is the min of the oiriv.
It's a species, I guess.
Right.
That's close to it. If we knew all the birds, you'd know which one it is.
But the Gemara doesn't. It's odd. The Gemara tells you for 2 of them what the min is, but for 2 of them doesn't tell you. Like I said, I don't know how you're supposed to know that. Okay, fine. Now, but to show the complication of figuring out what these things, so to speak, really are, what birds they really are, is that the first one, the nesher, which the Gemara talks a lot about the nesher. Okay, it's the paradigm of a treif bird. We'll talk about that in a second. The nesher, and Tyson says, lots of people think that nesher means an eagle. He says, and it's not true. Okay, and Tyson says, I don't think that nesher is an eagle. Because, as you're going to see in a second, there are 4 simanim that are associated with Kosher or treif birds, 4 different ways the simanim can be. And the Gemara says that an Esher has all the simanim of being treif. And Tosfos says it's not true. Eagles are missing at least one of them. One of those simanim, they don't have a siman of being treif. Okay? So that means that everyone thinks the word Esher. Most of us think that Esher means eagle. And Tosfos says that's what lots of people think. He said, but it's not true. Okay, so people came up with another idea, that Nesher means griffin vulture. Okay? The only problem is that they only think that because they say, well, it's not an eagle, so it must be something else, it's griffin vulture, but Rabbi Sifkin says, yeah, but griffin vulture also doesn't have the 4 siman of being treif. So you didn't get anything better by making it into a griffin vulture rather than being than being an eagle. You didn't gain anything. So all of these, this machlokes is all over the place. All these birds, what they mean. So I'm going to give you some groups that are in there someplace. Exactly where they are is not always so clear. Bats and falcons and ostrich. Ostrich we actually talked about once before. It's a basiana. Owls and pelicans and raven and stork and vultures. But exactly which bird is which one is very vague. Not vague. It's lots of machlokes and lots of questions about those things. Okay. So the Torah doesn't tell us how to know which bird is treif. There's a Ran who talks about it. He says, wait a second, there's only 24 treif birds, so then you should go bust a roiv. If you find a bird or you find an egg, you should bust a roiv. And the Ran has 3 tortim. I'm not going to tell you what they are. 3 tortim the Ran has about why you don't follow the roiv, why you don't go bust a roiv, just to save most birds in kosher. Okay. The Gemara but says that there's what do you say? You don't go, if nobody knows it, no one knows the 24 birds. So you look higher. That's the Ran talks about. The Ran has 3 tortim for why it should be. The Ran in Chulun. Okay, so the Gemara says there's a way to figure out whether a bird is kosher or treif. Okay, and the Gemara does it by comparing what I said to you about a nesher to a dove. I'm sorry, to a dove, not a dove. Dove. So a nesher, the Gemara says, so if you look at these two, a dove has all 4 kosher siman, 4 siman that are one way, a nesher has the exact opposite, and by that I can tell you that, every treif or kosher bird doesn't have to have all of one or the other. But it tells you this, that there are siman that tell you about it, and the nesher has all the siman pointing to being treif, the dove has all the siman being kosher, and other ones in the middle, the Gemara explains to you how many each one of them has, how many siman it has. Okay? So the first one is, these things are brought in Sim Pibet, that if the bird is a dairis, then it's not kosher. Okay, what is it? Dairis v'oichel. What does dairis v'oichel mean? It means it's like a savage bird. The Beis Yosef has 4 pshatim as to what dairis means. The 2 that are brought in Shulchan Aruch, one is a Taz. A Taz says that it means it eats the prey before it's dead. Okay? It's dairis v'oichel, meaning when it grabs the thing, it eats it, it didn't die yet. It's dairis, it's eating before it died. That's a Taz's pshat. That's what Taz learns. Is what dairis v'oichel means. That's the pshat. Dad?
It holds itself on the legs.
And the other pshat is the shach brings from Rashi, which is that it holds onto things that are. No, the other pshat, the shach brings, I'm sorry, not Rashi pshat, no, not Rashi. Rashi is a different pshat, about picking things up. The shach brings a pshat that it attacks things with its nails, okay? It attacks things with its claws, and some of that's how it kills them, whatever that means. Okay, the Shach says that the Shulchan Aruch in other places uses that, what dairis means in Hilchos Treifas, so that's what it says means. Okay, so if the bird is a dairis, it's for sure it is treif. Okay, what happens if you don't know if it's a dairis? So the Shulchan Aruch brings 2 ways to know that a bird, 2 things that prove to us that the bird is a dairis. Okay, the first is, if the bird, when it sits on a thin wire, does it sit with 2 fingers in the front and 2 fingers in the back? Most birds, if you look, you'll see most birds sit with 3 fingers in the front and 1 finger in the back. But if it sits with 2 fingers in the front and 2 fingers in the back, there's a fancy name for that. It's called a zygodacatel, okay, in case you're wondering. So it has 2 fingers in the front and 2 fingers in the back. That's the simon that it's a dairis. Okay. And the second simon is that if you throw food at it and it catches it and eating it without putting it onto the floor, it just catches it in the air and eats it straight, that's another simon that it's a dairis. Okay? Those are 2 simon that it's a dairis. Okay, so now what happens is if it's not a dairis, there's 3 other simanim to tell us whether the bird is kosher or treif. Okay, and they're like this. The first one is etz b'yisera. Okay, so this is etz b'yisera. An etz b'yisera. It's from Encyclopedia Britannica. I didn't make the pictures. So there's a machlokes what it means to be an etz b'yisera. Either an etz b'yisera means is that has a extra toe, literally an extra toe, which means is that in the back it has a toe. Now, in these cases, are not great ones of it, but the toe in the back is a little lifted up, or it's not in the line with the rest of the toes that are there. Okay, it has an extra toe. These are not great pictures of that. Or the other shot is that the middle finger in the front is noticeably longer than the other ones, which most of these are. Okay, actually, the osprey over here, I'm sorry. This osprey over here, this has 2 fingers in the front and 2 in the back. I don't know if you see that. What we said before, in the back, sitting with 2 in the front and 2 in the back. That's this. Osprey is an example of that. But some of the other ones, if you look at it like this one, this New World vulture over here, his middle finger is longer than the other ones. So that's, according to some, is an Etzbis here. For your curiosity, Pri Chadash wants to say that the reason why the machlekes of whether an eagle could be a nesher or not may depend on this shaila. What does an etzbis here mean? If etzbis here means extra long in the front, or etzbis here means something in the back. Okay, so there's one simon is if it has this extra, etzbis here means literally an extra finger, it may be called a halachos in English, or if it means that it has a longer finger, that the middle finger is extra long. Okay, like you look at the one on the bottom left, that finger is not longer, the middle finger is not longer. Okay, all 4 fingers look better the same size. Okay, that's one. The next is if it has a zefek. Okay, what's a zefek? A zefek is many birds can eat food and not digest it right away. It doesn't go right into their stomach. It goes into this pouch called a zefek. It's over there, in case you can't see what it says, a crop. Okay, and it's like an extra little pouch. It's in the middle of its throat or neck. I don't know what you're going to call it, the bottom of the neck. And food just sits there. Okay, so food sits there and not being digested in there. So a bird that has a zefek is a similar being kosher if it has a what?
It's not if it's peeled.
We'll come to that in a second. No, that's not the zefek. That's the next one. So a zefek is if it has this extra piece here. It's called in English a crop. A zefek has this extra pouch.
A dove doesn't have a crop.
What do you say?
A dove doesn't have a crop.
It does. It's a similar being kosher.
What is
It's in being kosher. Most birds have a
chicken there, see?
Right, there's a chicken. Yeah, most birds have a zefek.
Yeah.
Most birds have a zefek. There's a shilas. There's a Kosher about that also, about how big the zefek has to be. Some birds don't actually have something that looks like a zefek, but the food just can collect there anyhow. Okay, all kinds of shilas. What qualifies as a zefek? Okay? But in this case, that's a little pouch over there. That's a zefek. So what happens is, in this case, it's a chicken. He can eat and eat and eat, and then digest it as he wants to, which is very good for before a fast. Like, you know what I mean? You can just take in the extra food, and when you're ready to, you let it out into your stomach. Okay? And the third simon is that it has, before I go to the slide, I'm going to show it to you on this slide, is it has a korkavan that can be peeled. Okay, so yes, it's okay.
That's similar to kosher?
Kosher. A korkavan that can be peeled by hand. Okay, where's the korkavan? The korkavan is in English as a gizzard. You'll see it in the slide in a second.
Gizzard.
A gizzard, it's called. That's over here. And that is like this. Before I go to the next slide, you'll see what it really means, which is that birds don't have teeth. Okay, so when they eat food, they don't chew it up. So what they do is they just eat the food, they swallow it as is. So what happens is, their stomach has 2 parts. One part is the part where the digestion happens. It's called the proventriculus. Okay, that's this part over here. That's where, like, what happens, like in your stomach, that the juices come out and the digestion happens. But then there's another part, the gizzard, which has another name, some ventricle thing it's called. Where over there, that's where the bird grinds up the food. You can't digest big pieces. So the food passes back and forth between these 2 parts over here, back and forth between them in the gizzard. In the gizzard, sometimes in the gizzard, the korkavan or the pupik in Yiddish, the pupik in that part is where the food gets ground up, and then it gets passed back to the other part where the actual digestion happens. Okay, it goes back and forth between those parts. Once it's all digested, like in your stomach, then it moves on to the intestines. Okay, so this korkavan, the korkavan has 2 layers. On the outside of it is a muscle. That's the part that does the grinding. And the inside is a layer that's like a tissue-ish layer, you'll see in a second. And so if you could peel those 2 layers apart, biyad, you don't need a tool, just by hand you can peel them apart. So then that's a symbol of a kosher bird. Now, I was about to ask someone at a shechita to make me a picture of it. Just make me a video, just of the guy peeling the korkavan, because it's not hard to do. So could make me a video. But on a whim, I decided, maybe there's somebody else who already made a video of it. So I found the guy. I don't know why this person made it. It's not like a from person made. You think a from person made it. No, you'll see the video in a second. You'll see him peeling his korkavan. Why he made the video, I haven't a clue. Because if a korkavan could be peeled the 2 layers apart by hand, that's a symbol of a kosher bird. That's a symbol of a kosher bird. Okay? This is a korkavan.
Where'd you get it?
They're similar to the ones that were that are upstairs, only they're laying out here in the garage at package room.
You can ignore the talk. No shackles.
Sounds like something.
Well,
One thing that sounds.
Once you get a hold of it, that's something to hold of it.
I'm not having too good luck.
You're not having good luck people in it.
See?
Well, she got it right away.
Okay, so if you notice also the green stuff that I cleaned out, that's actually a shiloh and plaiskin. You may have to clean it up before malicha. That's we do that. Indeed, we do take it out. It's a shiloh and plaiskin. That green stuff, which is ground up, sort of digested food. What?
You probably wouldn't even eat it anymore.
Who doesn't eat it?
Nobody.
Kurkuvans?
Yes.
Yes, they most definitely do. People definitely eat
They don't
kurkuvans.
sell it anymore. When I
Puppets?
was a kid, they used to.
I don't know. When I was at the street, they were buckets and buckets of them. Someone's buying them. Puppets. I don't know. People buy them.
Salami.
Okay. No, not the salami. No, it's puppets. Okay, so that's it. Okay, so they clean out the yes. That's correct. The green stuff is a shiloh thing you have to take out before malicha. But anyhow, so we take it out. But you just saw the guy do was you saw the guy peeling the kurkuman. So that's a simon of a kosher bird. Okay, so the Gemara says, and the Gemara gives rules of if you find a bird, how many simanim you have to know if it's kosher. The Gemara says the ones with a few simanim don't live in town, don't live in habitable areas. So it wants to tell you how you can use these simanim to figure out if a bird is kosher or not kosher. Okay, but then the Gemara tells a story that there was this community that ate a certain bird, the agua, I think it's called, a bird that they ate, and they found that after a while they didn't realize that it was a dirus. After a while they realized it, so it's sort of like shook them up. The Gemara tells us the story. The Gemara doesn't say that therefore you shouldn't follow the simanim. But Rashi brings that later on a minute developed that people should only eat a bird that has a Mesorah to it. They should not be samach on the simanim. Hagam, the Gemara says it, and Shulchan Aruch brings them, but Shulchan Aruch then brings it that there's this meaning that people only eat birds from the Mesorah. We're not samach on the simanim. There really are simanim to know. If it has this many simanim, you can eat the bird, depending on the situation. The Gemara, but the thing we say is a person can only eat a bird with a siman. Okay, now. With the Mesorah. Now, but then the Shulchan Aruch says that Rishonim said this is not a Gemara that said that if you could be sure that the bird is not a dirus, then you could eat it even without Mesorah. What is that example of that? Is if a bird has webbed feet and has a wide beak, those are what I just described in the duck. Okay, if it has those kind of things, it has webbed feet and a big beak, there's no way that it could be a dirus, so you don't have to have this chashash that maybe it's a dirus and you're just missing it, you're somebody you don't know. Then if it has the right amount of simanim, then you're allowed to eat it, okay? And the Mechaber is like that. The Mechaber in Halacha Beis says that you have to have a Mesorah. He brings the simanim and he says, but even so, you can only eat bird if it has a Mesorah. But in Halacha Gimel he says, but if it has a wide beak and has webbed feet, that's a duck or a goose, those kind of birds. If it has the simanim, you don't have to worry that it's a dirus. It's partial that it's not a dirus, and you could eat it. Okay, that's what the Mechaber says.
Having the simanim mean not necessarily all four.
So that's a shot of how many simanim. I'm not talking about because the Ramah. Let me just finish the sentence. And you know why? The Ramah says we don't care. We don't not tell on that. Even though the Mechaber brings from Rishonim.
Does the Mechaber rely on the simanim of the or just?
He says, in general, he says you cannot rely on the simanim. He says, but except in this case, where it has the wide beak.
That's how turkeys got accepted.
No, Turkey will be next time. Okay, but so.
Did you already get Mesorah on the waterfowl?
What do you say?
Cookies and
No, right. So according to the Mechaber,
No,
according to
they went through this.
the Mechaber, if it has webbed feet and a wide beak, then you could use the simanim. Then you could, in which case almost every duck and goose and swan will be kosher because that's what they have. They will have this siman. They're all similar to it, yes. But the Rama says no, we're not similar on that. Even for those birds, we need a Mesorah also. Okay, so the Mechaber does it. The Mechaber brings a siman because then you get to the duck cases, to those kind of cases. But Sardim can eat based on just that. That tells you it's not a dirus, and then you look for the simanim, and the Rama says no, we can't do that. Okay, so now, so we're Ashkenazim. So we go to Ramah. No, Shirt's not over. I'm going to tell you this time. I have more to say today and next time also. I'm not finished. Give me a minute. So we have to only eat birds with the Mesorah. Okay? So there's two questions to talk about having a Mesorah. Okay? And next time, we're going to talk about some examples of these things. And that's this. If we say that I have a Mesorah that a bird is kosher, let's say chicken is kosher. Okay, so how I hold a chicken in front of me, and this is the chicken that we've been eating. It's been him and his children and his grandchildren have been living in my backyard for 100 years, and we know that this chicken is kosher. I have a Mesorah, this chicken is kosher. What happens if I have a chicken that's a little bit different? Okay, how big is my Mesorah? Like in the 24 birds that we had beforehand, those doesn't mean one specific bird. It doesn't mean all type of eagle. It might mean all of the eagles. Okay, so how much is the bird that I have being kosher? How much is the Mesorah? This is a kosher bird. How wide is that Mesorah? Like for example,
Can you decide the point of the simanim is to, what's the point of the simanim if you need it?
the simanim is if you don't know what the bird is. The simanim is you walk in the forest and you see a bird and you have no idea what it is.
Simanim anyway.
We don't do that, right? So we need a Mesorah.
So we don't even care about the simanim at all.
Right. So
And what if we find a bird that we thought we had a Mesorah doesn't have one of the simanim?
it doesn't have to have all simanim. That's a Gemara so that how many simanim each bird has to have. Only a nesher and a dove have to have all the simanim. The other birds in the middle don't have to have them all.
So we don't really care about
But
simanim.
except for Darius. Being Darius, that's like an overriding one. If you find he's a Darius, then he's no good. So, for example, the Zaki Tshuva has a zillion shilas. Okay, maybe that's an exaggeration. Okay, only a little bit. But the Zaki Tshuva has a million shilas, which was like this. Let's say, for example, I had birds that were basically the same, but they had a different colored beak, or a different colored leg, or a different colored skin. Is that the same bird or that's not the same bird? What happens if one was a little bit bigger than the one we used to, or its neck was longer, or its legs were longer? Okay, in other words, how close does it have to be to mine to say it's the same thing, or it's not in my Mesorah? What happens if one has feathers on his neck, and the other one only has feathers on his legs, and not on his neck? Okay, what happens if they have a few differences, or they have a lot of differences? Okay, so a million chuvas in Daki Tshuva, a million important Daki Tshuva about this, and it's very not clear how to know whether one bird, this is the same bird, or this isn't that bird. Okay, but you read Chaim Lucky, read for him, we talk to him, say, yeah, those two are the same, and those two are not the same. And to us lay people, I don't know, they all, how do you know the difference? You know, a bird is a bird, I don't know. But so how much enough is the same? I just got the Sears board, which I'm swiping for now. Chaim Lucky brought who knows how many birds to Rabbi Belsky, and he has pictures of each bird that he brought to Rabbi Belsky with what he said about it, to say, is this the same or is it not the same? You know, ducks are kosher, what about this duck, and what about this one, and what about this one? Is that the same as the duck that we have in Mesorah, or is it not the same? Okay? Now, so that's one, what?
It makes.
So, that's one, I'm coming to that in a second. That's one type of saying that this bird is the same as that bird. Okay, but another way of spreading it is a Gemara that talks about not about birds but about animals. The Gemara says that a kosher and a treif animal can't mate and produce a viable offspring. Okay, that's what it says about animals, which means is a cow and a horse wouldn't mate and make an animal that would be kosher, that would be a living, viable child.
But it's not a horse.
What?
It's not at all what I meant.
Okay,
But
but
I'm saying they mate. They're the same. They think they're the same. So what are we to do?
oh, so that's another side of shachin v'nidma. Shachin v'nidma. No, it has to be shachin and nidma. Okay, no, but the one says that animals, that kosher and treif animals cannot mate and produce a viable child. Now, according to the Gemara doesn't say that. We'll talk about that next time. But that it lives. There's a child is actually born from that. So we'll talk about that next time. So yeah, the according to that, does that Gemara apply to birds also? Meaning, the Gemara says that for animals, that there's such a rule. Tyson says it's not true by fish. By fish, kosher and treif can mate with each other. So what about by birds? Okay, so for example, that would mean, if it would be true that for birds the same rule would apply, then we open up a big opening over here. Because if this bird is kosher, let's say regular chicken is kosher, and another bird mates that chicken and produces a viable offspring, then that bird just got a Mesorah. We just spread our Mesorah to that bird, because if it's true that kosher and treif can't mate and produce something viable, we're going to give you examples of that next time. If they can't do that, then we can spread Mesorah from one bird to a completely different bird, as long as they can produce a child.
And then if you can mate with somebody else.
Right, we can take our Mesorah and spread it to other birds, not because it's the same. It's not, so first I said to you, maybe they're the same. Like this one's red, and this one's brown, maybe that's considered the same. But now I was thinking, if this one can mate with that one, I could spread my Mesorah to the other one from that also.
Also, you spread the Mesorah. It's a different way of identifying.
To me, if I only have a Mesorah on 5 birds, but I all of a sudden can eat 10 birds, I spread it to more birds, that one has no shaykhs to my bird, but through this, that was a way of proving that that's a kosher bird also.
So you just made a very important point. There's nothing to do with, it doesn't make them the same species at all.
Right, they're not. But it just proves that they're kosher. Just proves that they're kosher. Right. But it's taking the Mesorah I have my little Mesorah, and I can bring it to other places. Okay? So the Chassam Sofer starts
That's
with...
almost against what Rashi said with the halacha, that we only use birds with a Mesorah.
No, because Rashi said we're afraid that that other bird is a Darius, and we don't realize it yet. We haven't realized that the bird is a Darius. But if we have a rule that a kosher bird can't mate with a treif bird, then I don't have to worry. So I know it's not Darius because it's kosher. I have a right that it's kosher. Because
But then that would come out that I can start eating all these birds.
right, so then it would open up a lot of openings. So some Sefer starts off saying that he thinks that that's true, that in birds it's true also. The Gemara talks about animals. He thinks it's bird by bird also. He's not sure in the end. In the end, he's like not so convinced that he's right. The Abnezer says the Sefer really held like that. That was the Ikra Din, and the Abnezer himself passes like that.
Really did not help like that.
That the Sefer agreed to this kula, that really, but the Gemara said about animals is true about birds also. The Chassidus at the end is not so sure. But the Abnei says, but the Ikar didn't help like that. And the Abnei himself says, that's correct.
No one discussed it until it's over.
Well, I can't say that nobody, I don't know if nobody did. But people talked about it when they had birds that they had childhoods about. Right. Can we eat this new bird? They said, well, we see that it makes you that bird, and it produces viable also, so that should be a raya. We never saw this bird before, but it should be right. That new bird is kosher. Okay? So the Abnezer is makel, it's a big kula. It's opened up 100. Maybe I'll give it
Maybe have yours comes over back in 18.
Okay, that's what I know. Maybe I'll give it to us. Okay, now.
There's no such thing as a bird that we know tomorrow not kosher.
Right. It's very hard to know that a bird is not kosher. To know that it's not good. Not that we don't know. We know specifically that it's not kosher. It's not so easy to find that. It has to be one that we either we think it's one of the 24 birds of the Torah, or we see it's a Durs. There aren't so many treif birds.
And those
Most birds are just in the gray area. We don't know what they are. Okay, but the truth is probably most of them are kosher.
the 24.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as one of those
That we know of.
mating with.
That we know of. Right. Correct. That we know of. Well, I should say. That Chaim Lucky has told me that we know of. I don't know anything. If Chaim Lucky didn't tell me that. If there was existed, Chaim Lucky would tell us.
If you're talking about 24 species of birds that are Durs, is that a problem?
No, because the Gemara says that there's one of the birds, I forgot which one, there's in the East, the Gemara says there are 100 varieties of this bird. So again, that you have to know, what is a nate? A nate, we'll point to a specific bird. A tinchamis is an owl. Well, how many owls are included in that?
Limited is, you know what I'm saying? You have a pelican and an ostrich and not
right.
One is not mid of the other.
I answer. So
if I find 28 separate species like that,
then you're up the creek. Right. But again, you have to realize that, again, a species is broad. You know what I mean? One of them, I forgot which one of them is a bat. I forgot which one is the bat. Okay, one of them is a bat. Okay, there's lots of bats out there. You know? What? Okay, whichever, I remember. But one of them is a bat. So there's lots of bats out there. You know what I mean? So how many of them are included and how many look like bats? Right. But how many are included and how many are not? It's not clear at all, but probably lots of them. What'd you say?
We're not being included in that.
No, well, I mean a specific kind of bat. I don't know how many types of bats there are.
I wonder how much Moshe Rabbeinu held up when he was showing.
No, so what I think is, Moshe Rabbeinu held them up, the one that started men, but then he took them the rule. How do you know what's considered white and not white? So when you bang into a new bird, you'll know, I saw the 24, and I know the rules of how to decide what's like and what's not like, and now I know if this is like or not. Let's say what depends on like is your beak. So when I say beak, so how do you decide if it's like or not like? So when I say, is this like that? Yeah, but it doesn't have the same beak, then it's not like that. Whatever the rule, it was 24 plus rules, not 1,000 birds that he held up, 100. Okay, now the second thing is, the second shiloh, the second shiloh about getting a Mesorah, about moving a Mesorah is, what happens if in one community they eat a bird, and another community doesn't have a Mesorah for that bird? Okay, so the first I talked to you about was, I could take my Mesorah and spread it out. Either because I say this bird is basically the same, or I spread it out because it made to it that helped me spread my Mesorah. What happens if I have no Mesorah on this bird? I want to eat a peacock. Okay, in Chicago, nobody thinks peacocks are kosher. But there are other communities that think peacocks are kosher. Okay, they have Mesorah, it's true. That think that peacocks are kosher. Okay? What?
Where they have peacocks are kosher? Not much meat.
I have no idea what it has meat on it. But anyhow, so... Yeah, okay. So there are other people who think peacocks are kosher. So and they come and say to me, David, you should know that peacocks are kosher. So can I take that Mesorah or can I not take it? Okay, so now... I don't remember speaking. If I would have, I wouldn't have told you that. Oh, okay, that doesn't count. Okay, so the Rush says like this. So the Rush says it's okay taking Mesorah from a different place, and the Rashba says you can't. Okay, now what I just said to you, the way I said it to you so dramatically is that the Rush says you can, the Rashba says you can't. That's how the Mechaber understands it. The Mechaber at the end of Sim Pebez says like this. He says, Can I eat from a different place? Yesh mi sh'oiser. Some people say it's osir. That's the Rashba. V'yesh mi shemater. That's the Rush. V'yesh lochosh sh'divri ha'oiser. You should go like the oiser who says you can't get from a different community. That's what do you say? Oh, real quick, I'm going to get to in a second. Okay, so that's the Mechaber says you should follow that people who you're not allowed to take them Mesorah. The Shach says no, it's not correct. Okay, The Shach says, there isn't a machlok between the Rosh and the Rashba. I feel bad. I should put the words on the screen for you. There's no machlok between the Rosh and the Rashba. The Rosh says is, you could take a Mesorah, they're talking about different cases. If you saw the words of the Rashba, you hear what the Shach is saying. He says, the Rosh is talking about that I have no idea whether peacocks are kosher or not, and it never occurred to me whether peacocks are kosher, and you come over from someplace else, from Italy, and you tell me that in Italy we eat peacocks, so I say, oh, you guys eat peacocks? Okay, so now I know that peacocks are kosher. So why shouldn't I trust you that it's kosher? Why not? Why shouldn't I believe you? And the Raj was talking about different cases, where we have a community where they had a Mesorah cannot eat peacocks. Not that we didn't know anything about peacocks. We had lots of peacocks walking around, and we bedavka, the Rav said, no, we don't eat peacocks in this community. So then, if the person comes from another place and says to you, no, but peacock's really kosher, then the reason why we now accept his Mesorah, not because we don't trust him, we say maybe our chacham made like an issur on it. It's too close to another bird. They say, don't eat this bird. So, of course you could take someone else's word that a bird is kosher. If he tells you that it's kosher, believe it. If he told you it's kosher. But the only time you can't is when you specifically have a minute to we do not eat that bird. Like in America, we don't eat. Okay, I'm not going to eat it. Okay. If we had a specific Mesorah, that'll be for next time. I didn't say it. It's going to be next time. Okay, so we have a Mesorah specifically not to eat it, then that's what we do.
But if the reason that we have a Mesorah not to is because we never had a Mesorah.
No, so then we don't have a Mesorah not to eat it. We just don't eat it. We don't know anything about it, so we never tried it. We didn't.
Is there anything in America we have a minute not to eat?
We'll talk about it next time. Okay, so we'll talk about it next time. So Ramosha. So Ramosha says to pass like the Shach. Shach also thought like that. You should pass like the Shach. That you can take a Mesorah from another community as long as you don't have a Mesorah specifically to not eat that bird. Okay? Now, however, that being said, that's cooler. However, there's a big question, and that is like this. When I want to take a Mesorah from your community, you say that you eat peacocks, and now I want to start eating peacocks. So, l'chayra, I have to look into the fact of, how did you guys decide that peacocks were kosher? Like, for example, there are places in Russia that eat swans. Okay? And I say, well, if they eat swans, then I can eat swans also. See, wait a second. Maybe the reason why they eat swans is because they pass like the Mechaber, who held that if it has a webbed feet and a big beak, then it's kosher. It's
not based on Mesorah.
No, they have the Mesorah because for generations they've been eating swans. But how did they decide? Maybe the first day, it's not because they heard it from Moshe Rabbeinu that it was okay. It's because the Rav looked at the swans, he said, no, Shulchan Aruch says it has webbed feet. And a wide feet, then you're allowed to eat it. And he decided you're allowed to eat swans. And now, 100 years later, of course we eat swans. So then it's kosher that we eat it. To them they have a Mesorah that they eat swans. But maybe the Mesorah started from something that we don't hold like. Maybe the Mesorah is because they pass like one of these Darkei Tshuvas I told you about. Darkei Tshuva has 100 Tshuvas about, is this bird exactly the same as that bird or not? So maybe their Rav decided that it's the same, that this variety is basically the same as that one. That was 100 years ago, someone made that decision on a shaila, and then maybe we don't agree to that psak. They base it on, there are lots of shailas to decide whether a bird is kosher or not. Again, I told you, in theory we only use a Mesorah. But there's a lot of space over here to find that even doesn't have a Mesorah, you could sort of get it to be kosher anyhow. So maybe their, so to speak, Mesorah comes from a not such a solid place. And I don't mean solid. It doesn't come from a place that I would have agreed to. So there was some, and if you look, the Rosh, I told you the Rosh is the one who said you can't get a Mesorah from somebody else. The Rosh says, but when you do that, be very careful and look into where their Mesorah came from. Don't just take it. Because the Rosh himself, it's in a different place. The Rosh himself says it, be careful how you take someone's Mesorah. So you should know, the Tzemach Tzedek says that that because of that, you shouldn't be taking Mesorah from other people. In theory, you could.
Which one?
I don't remember when I'm looking at it, I think it's Lubavitch something, but I might be wrong. I think that's what it is. Says you should not take it because of this chashash, okay, this possibility. And Rabbi Shechter said, what you should do is you could take it from a place, but as long as they give or take the same as you. You're Hungarian and they're Hungarian, so then Mislam, you're Rabbanan pass in similar ways. But you're Italian and we're Hungarian, so the Italians eat peacocks, and we come from, I don't know, wherever you come from, Ukraine, I don't know where you come from, and that's not the same, Mahala Chapsat, then you shouldn't take it, but you should know.
I was told Rosh Hashanah said you can trust the 10 money on Chagam.
Okay, so I forgot to mention it. So Reb Chaim Kanievsky speaks about that. This part of this, all this shines about this. He talks about living Chagavim, whether you could trust them Chagavim or not. You probably know that most Ashkenazim don't eat Chagavim, right? Even though Timonah will tell them what they are. I didn't say whether Reb Shechter is, but okay. So, but you should. But the Beis Yitzchak and the Ramshit both say that you shouldn't be worried about the chashash, that maybe they pass based on something else. They say each a little differently. One says it's a sekseka. Suffolk that it might be kosher, and Suffolk maybe they didn't base it based on something funny like you think. You know what I mean? Okay, and the second is the other one says just stop, don't make kosher such thing. If they have a Mesorah that's kosher, you're allowed to eat it. And they say
You need to do the simanim, right? You need to follow the rules of the simanim.
the rules of simanim are very weak. What I mean is, you don't have to have all 4 simanim to be kosher. So, as long as it's not a dervis, if you see it in your backyard and you see it's a dervis, you're finished. But the other simanim, okay, we didn't go into the details. The other simanim are pretty easy to get past. You don't have to be too worried. Right, so you poke around a little bit.
Being in the Gemara, we really allowed to eat.
Right. Okay. So that you're saying that puts us a little more at ease. So that's more how the Mamshuk says. He says, why should it be chayshish if they made it based on a mistake? Well, it'd be chayshish, and the Beis Yitzchak says it more like it's a spec. It could be it's kosher anyhow. It's only a chum in the first place. So we should be talking. Okay. So that's well. In Mir Hashem, next time we'll talk about some of the examples. There's a zillion examples. I have 2 Svarim from Chaim Lucky, each of them are hundreds of pages long. Okay, and those are not all of his Svarim, so I can't tell you everything it says in there. I can't tell you everything it says in there, nor can I surely not poke into his brain to tell you everything he knows. But we'll talk about some examples next time.